Hi, I'm Rosemary J. Kind. Welcome to the first ever reading from my new novel, Justice Be Damned. For more information about this and my other books, please visit my website, www.rjkind.com. You can also download the prequel to the Flynn and Riley series, The Blight and the Blarney, absolutely free. Justice Be Damned. It's 1870, and someone needs to pay for Ben's death. Chapter 1. Pierceton, Indiana, March 1870. He said what? William Dixon could feel his nostrils flaring as he tried to keep his voice steady. That he don't rightly think the fire was deliberate, and that those boys shouldn't be tried for arson. The sheriff shrugged his shoulders, appearing to distance himself from his words. They damn near killed my sister and niece, and Ben died trying to save them. The Reese brothers should be tried for murder, never mind arson. William's hands were shaking as he took a deep breath to control his temper. He knew the sheriff was a good man, and the words he was expressing were not his own. But by God, William would, at the very least, see those Reese boys behind bars. What does Justice Warren say the charges will be? Trespass, the sheriff said quietly. His eyes darted up to meet William's and looked back down just as quickly. Given Reuben Reese confessed, Justice Warren can't try claiming they weren't at Cochrane's farm. Story goes they had their lamps with them and got lost on their way home from Marsh's bar. Lamp spilled and the oil caught light, but by then they'd moved on, too drunk to notice. William thumped the desk. My sister's farm wasn't on their way home, and those boys have lived around here long enough not to get as lost as all that. It was in the opposite direction out of town to their place, though I'll grant they had fields which bordered Molly's land. He snorted. This would be funny if it weren't so serious. With the bad news delivered, the sheriff relaxed a little. Why'd your sister have to go buying what was left of their land? They were sore enough over what their daddy lost to her. There's only one thing more trouble than an idle man, and that's an idle man with a grudge. Aye, and don't I know it? Those boys will have all the time in the world to cause problems if they aren't in prison or hanged. William got up from the side of the sheriff's desk and paced around the small office. It was only 3 paces across, so that proved more frustrating than calming. I need some air. Then maybe I'll ride out to Warsaw and see Justice Warren in person. He was friends with their daddy, you know. It won't do no good. The sheriff couldn't meet William's eye, and it simply served to make William more determined to see this through to a satisfactory outcome. What kind of world was it where a man could be killed and a house burnt down deliberately, and yet no one stand trial for those actions? Would Justice Warren see things differently if Ben hadn't been black, or if he'd been born in Pierceton, as the Reese brothers had? William sighed. Good day, Sheriff. William nodded his head to the man, then marched out into the street, breathing deeply to fill his lungs with something good and wholesome as he went. There was still a chill in the air, in sharp contrast to being indoors, and the freshness was welcome. The walk back to Dixon's attorney's office gave William time to think. Reuben Reese had confessed to arson. His intention was clear, and a man had died. Yes, the brothers had thought there was no one in the property when they set it alight, but of course they must have known it was a possibility. William tried to consider what action his father would take if he were handling the case, and resolved to send word to him in Dowagiac as soon as he got to his own desk. He guessed his father had experience of life in a small town, with all the back-scratching that went on. But for William, all this was new. He believed in the rule of law, and he wasn't ready to accept that justice wasn't available for all men, regardless of birth. He needed the established hand of a father figure more than ever to introduce him in all the right places, and fervently wished there was someone in Pierceton who could take that role. Moving to a new town had been harder than he'd thought. When he opened the street door of the office, Cecilia was deep in conversation with his sister's friend, Sarah Spencer. Given the appointment had been booked, William presumed the discussion was business and slipped quietly through to the back of the premises. Cecilia would no doubt update him later. He was proud to work alongside his wife. To his mind, she was the better attorney, though he rather hoped she didn't realise that. He went back to pondering the Reese brothers' case. The law failed so many of the people around him. His father had brought him up to believe that fighting for justice through the courts was laudable, but the more he worked, the more William saw that well-connected white men were the only ones who could truly find justice that way. If justice was the right term for a system which favoured their every move, it was worse than that. From what he could see, they'd got the whole political arena sewn up too. To make a name for himself, he either needed to conform to the stereotype or blow it wide open, exposing it for what it was. He smiled, feeling his street fighter roots rising to the surface. He had not been scared to go head-to-head then, and he wouldn't be now. Admittedly, he had more to lose in reputation, but the difference was, this time, he had right on his side, and Cecilia to support him. He could do this. Firstly, he needed to seek his father's counsel. He sat down behind the desk and took a sheet of paper from the stand. He'd got no further than dressing the letter when Cecilia came through and sat in the chair in front of him. He looked up at the grave expression on her face. Sarah's scared for her own safety and the safety of the children. It seems Joseph Spencer is a violent man. William put the pen back in the stand and frowned. Are we talking about the same Joseph Spencer? I always thought he was a better man than that. The Joe we know wouldn't raise a hand to either his wife or the children, would he? Cecilia nodded slowly. I don't think she rightly knows how far he would go. He took his belt to her in front of young Henry for joining the women's rights protest last month. Cecilia shuddered. She says it makes it impossible for her to bring up the child to see things any differently to his father. William noticed the deep sadness in his wife's eyes. This is one area where, thankfully, I have no experience. Granted, my father by birth was a drinker, but he never laid a hand on Mammy. Not that I ever knew of, anyway. He paused, remembering back to his early life. He shook himself and focused on Sarah's situation. The law does little to give her protection. He sighed heavily. I've no more idea how we advise her than I know how we get the Reese boys tried for murder, or arson at the very least. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this reading from Justice Be Damned. You can find out whether William finds a way to achieve justice for both Ben and Sarah by reading the rest of the book. I hope you enjoy the story. Please, when you have read the book, do leave reviews. Reviews really do help new readers to find an author's work. Thank you.